So we're tackling One Piece today. After so many years of hesitating to start the series, I'm finally making the plunge into One Piece. I still remember when the series was at about 600 or so chapters and that scared me. Now it's just... But with One Piece entering its final saga, I felt this was my final chance to experience the series during its run. I'm not even properly a part of the fandom yet, and the idea of the ending of this 30-year epic being spoiled even scares me. Nah, I'm catching up. Before we start though, I just want to note what I already know about the series. I will say that I did watch the notorious 4Kids dub when I was a kid. Yeah, that's right, I know the pirate rap. But honestly, I liked it and completed all of East Blue. But after that, my recollection of the series is pretty fuzzy. I think I vaguely recall this guy, and maybe a couple of episodes of Chopper, maybe? Because this guy looks familiar to me. I don't even recall my interest waning watching 4Kids, but from memory they just slowly stopped airing episodes or something. And as a kid, your attention span isn't exactly your strong point. Aside from 4Kids, I think I'm pretty familiar with the current crew, or close to it. I also know the existence of Kaido and Gear 5, it's pretty much unavoidable. Now if that makes you cringe, then hold on to your seats, bucko, because unfortunately, I know Ace dies. I know it sucks. But to be fair, I don't know when that happens, but yeah, when you frequent the anime community, you're just bound to hear things, and I just wanted to be transparent about that. As far as what medium I'll use, I'll be reading the manga. Even with my limited knowledge on the series, it seems unanimously agreed by fans and non-fans alike that One Piece has a pacing issue. And aside from that, I prefer manga anyway, and I'm keen to review the art alongside the narrative as the series goes on. One of the benefits of reading a long-running series, in my opinion, is the evolution of art style. And what better material than one of the longest-running manga of all time? As if the intro isn't long enough already, I just wanted to mention that these One Piece reviews would be way more laid back than my typically critical type of analysis on this channel. So to my 72 subscribers, don't be alarmed of the shakeup. I decided this because I think it's unfair to make at least hardcore dissections and criticisms about a series I haven't completed, let alone barely scrape the surface of. And by the time I write some deep dive, my opinion will drift within another 10 chapters, and I don't have time for that. Think of this more like a journal of my thoughts. If it were any more, I'd be writing more than I'm reading, and I don't want these videos to kill my momentum. So if I skip noting some points, please bear with me. I know there's a time skip midway through the series, and I reckon I'll take a break there and make some analysis content on the series then. And as a long-time member of the anime manga community, I know it generally takes some time for a series to get its wheels turning. Trust me, I'm patient, I know the drill, and I'm finally ready for One Piece. So after we get familiar with Gold Roger, who was the king of the pirates, probably not important, we immediately cut to Luffy's childhood. And this is where I really started to question how much will be different from the anime, because from my recollection, we only learn about the events of the flashback when we met Buggy. Here, it happens in chapter 1. I guess we'll see. The antagonist of the pilot is Higuma, and something I never thought about as a kid is there's so many criminal factions in One Piece. In East Blue alone, we see pirates, obviously, bandits, thieves, bounty hunters, and even sub-factions like these 7 warlord guys. Aside from the warlords, I'm most keen to see more bounty hunters, since I know the bounty system is somewhat the power measure in this verse. And as far as my initial thoughts on the art, it's funny because if I read it 5 years ago, I'd probably have heavily disliked it. I generally much prefer the cool, slick, modern style of art, but with everything in shonen leaning towards that nowadays, I've been kind of burnt out on it, and this softer, classic art style was honestly a breath of fresh air for my eyeballs. I really enjoy the panel sizing, and although there's a lot of detail in some panels, my eyes never feel like they're overwhelmed or drifting to find where I should be looking. But we're covering the entirety of East Blue here, so we're gonna get rolling. This backstory was solid, and if there's any better evidence of its captivating nature, even just through the single instance I watched as a child, I recall every key beat and feel it's ingrained in my memory. Even with my limited knowledge, I know that One Piece has a knack for backstories, and this first chapter felt like it had so much substance without ever feeling rushed, establishing how Luffy gained his character and his powers really naturally with a lot of charm. Now this is what I remember as the beginning. So we gain a friend in Kobe and make our way to get the notorious pirate hunter Zoro. I still remember going to some knick-knack store as a child and coming across some plastic katanas and begging my mum for it. And when she asked which one I wanted, I said, I want all 3. No. So I got one, and as Luffy himself questions the 3 swords, I'm sure my mother that day was equally as confused. The novelty of Zoro's 3 swords left such a strong impression on me in my childhood, and reading it now, it's just as cool. Also at this point in the story, I was kind of shocked by the brisk pace. Before I started, I would have thought Zoro's arc would have been around 10 chapters rather than just 5. With the addition of Zoro, it becomes apparent that this series is one of dreams. With Gold Roger giving birth to the dreams of seemingly every single pirate including Luffy, we also get established to Kobe's dream and Zoro's dream. I also find it really charming how even with all of One Piece's absurdist themes and novel concepts, the premise remains as simple as pirates embarking to find the world's greatest treasure. It's so simple and effective. But speaking of dreams, my grasp on what the King of the Pirates even is still unclear to me. Judging by Luffy's character, I can imagine he values the adventure as much as the actual goal. But if he does attain the One Piece, what would being the King of the Pirates entail? Would he have to do paperwork like Naruto? But again, I guess we'll see. So Koby joins the Marines and we get our first official crew member in Zoro. To establish the world a little bit, it seems to find the One Piece, one must enter a specific section of the sea called the Grand Line. And aside from being unprepared for such a trek in every other respect, it becomes apparent to Luffy that he needs a navigator. This is definitely a part of One Piece I'm really enjoying. You'll come across a lot of series in which the main group grows in numbers because of reasons, but in One Piece it's imperative for Luffy to fill out a functioning pirate crew. Expanding the main cast is essential to advance. Without any effort, each position adds so much flavor to each character, even down to their idiosyncrasies outside of their roles, such as how Sanji only uses his legs to fight since a cook's hands are considered their most valued asset. These guys are their roles first, fighters second, and I love that. So we get introduced to Nami and who I feel is the first real antagonist of the series in Buggy. But before touching on Buggy, I really enjoyed Luffy's interactions with various characters and in particular crew candidates. Each exchange feels really candid and the consistent personality clashes to Luffy's wide-eyed nature is something I always look forward to reading. I could understand if people find this annoying, but Luffy is clearly always receptive of the truly important details and I think it would be really inaccurate to say that the priority of these scenes is exposition anyway. From my perspective, I feel like Oda is valuing the interaction in and of itself the most. Another dynamic I'm really enjoying is how infamous Zoro is in the world of pirates, especially in contrast to Luffy in his own novice position as pirates themselves. I know I'm in for some hardcore world building in the future, so what I'm reading now pales in comparison, but I felt even these small moments really contributed to my impression of this pirate world being interconnected and alive. So Buggy is our first character aside from Luffy to have devil fruit powers, his being the chop chop fruit. Since the series is over 1000 chapters, I know that Buggy would be irrelevant by now, but holy crap, isn't this fruit kind of OP? If it were given to anyone even a hair smarter than Buggy, I feel like it'd still be a problem by chapter 1000. But anyway, the big three is established and we go about our way. By the time we're in Syrup Village, the amount of instances of the world feeling interconnected keep growing. I can't tell to what degree Ichiro Oda has legitimate foresight or that he's just really savvy with reusing assets in the moment, maybe a mix of both. But it's really intriguing and such moments feel like they gain a level of depth that otherwise would have not existed. Another world-building property introduced during Syrup Village is something I've never experienced in all my years reading manga, and that is the cover page stories. At the beginning of some chapters, the cover art is replaced with continued stories of former characters, spanning across multiple chapters and even converging with other familiar faces. Along with the SBS section where Oda answers fan questions, as a whole, One Piece is easily one of the most rewarding manga experiences I've ever had. Now, this Kuro guy. One of the vaguer elements of One Piece to me so far is its power systems. The devil fruits are well established and make sense, but my perception of everyone else is that they're somewhat relative to real life. I don't get the impression it's like Dragon Ball where the human ceiling is world breaking or something, but then damn out of the blue, some of these hits these humans are taking is insane. Like when isn't Zoro dealing with a worse than fatal injury? I feel like there's this uncanny valley of strength in One Piece, which isn't a bad thing, but they're so close to real life, but not quite. These guys can take some blows. Which leads me to Kuro. He doesn't seem to have a devil fruit, but he's clearly superhuman in some way. So what's going on there? Reading past East Blue as I write this, I'm getting the sense this technique Kuro has won't be relevant again and it's just this anomaly so far. Again, I guess we'll see. Syrup Village culminates with the Straw Hats getting a proper vessel and Usopp joining the crew. He fills somewhat of a sniper role and personality-wise, I feel he rounds out the crew really well. Even as early as this period, I felt there was so much dimension in how each crew member bounced off one another, each having their own distinct style of relationships with a level of nuance that convinces me that they're all legitimate friends. And by the time Sanji eventually joins, I mean, do I even have to elaborate on the dynamics he adds? This is such a solid core to the crew with all of them being thoroughly established by the end of the first saga. The Baratie is easily the most compelling setting so far and it's such an interesting and logical concept for a pirate-based universe. It's this floating restaurant in the middle of the ocean that attracts the typical curious customers, but also pirates. This environment has led to all the waiters jumping ship, leaving kitchen staff to run food. But how the Baratie has avoided a complete incursion is due to the fact that these seafaring cooks are tough as nails. It's so cool. World building begins to go ballistic here as we get introduced to a pirate crew, a pirate fleet rather, way more prepared than Luffy that attempted to sail the Grand Line. They didn't last a single week. And to top it off, the fleet of 50 ships were stopped by a single man. As early as Kobe, we began to hear horror stories of how treacherous the Grand Line is, also being referenced as the Pirate's Graveyard. And the Baratie arc really helped further push the idea that the Straw Hats are really out of their depth. This world is huge and remorseless. This leads me to mentioning the man himself, Hawkeye Mihawk. In hindsight, knowing that the series is over 1,000 chapters, it does shock me that we get to see Zoro's ultimate goal as early as chapter 50. For us at this moment, he's basically the Grand Line personified, and the veil of invincibility that we had on the likes of Luffy and Zoro begins to dissipate. This feeling is especially true when it's later revealed that he's part of a group called the Seven Warlords of the Sea. The fact that there's 6 other pirates to Mihawk's level is almost unbelievable, and I can only guess that they're still relevant today. Maybe I sound really stupid saying that. Meanwhile, Nami has stolen the merry-go and gone about her way, and this is the first true instance of arcs being woven together, and the amount of concurrently moving pieces in the story already is something I appreciate. I definitely forgot the levels of intricacy in Baratie and Arlong Park, but I'll touch on this again later. This is definitely something I remember from the 4Kids dub. Mihawk goes on to embarrass Zoro, but does him the courtesy of finishing him with his actual sword. Zoro vows to never lose again, and the arc concludes. Oh wait, it's still going. Honestly, Luffy vs Krieg was kind of a letdown after such an insane duel with Mihawk. I really did enjoy Sanji's flashback though, and this is one of the bigger examples of deplorable changes in the 4Kids dub because from memory, I don't think Zeph ate his leg. But yeah, this makes way more sense and it hits so much harder. And I will say this, even including Luffy's flashback, this was my favorite backstory so far, which immediately gets dethroned an arc later. And I love the parallels between Shanks and Zeph. Continuing with the theme of dreams, the relationship between Sanji and Zeph is so much more complex than I expected. The idea that two people at conflict can actually share the same dream, and the sharing of that dream is what brings them together, even to the point that one of them is willing to sacrifice themselves if it means the other can pursue it for the both of them, it's really beautiful. How dreams can evolve, the idea of unwelcomed obligation that restrains the original dream, it's really interesting. And the way Oda keeps Sanji's expressions rather reserved for the entire arc, but as soon as he speaks about his dream, it's like Sanji can't help himself and it's just adorable. There's definitely no confusion about what this series encompasses, and I'm keen to know what dreams future crewmates carry as well. But moving along, with Sanji becoming the final crew member of East Blue, I always wish that Yosaku and Johnny joined the crew. Luffy, Sanji and Yosaku surge forward to Arlong Park, where they'll rally with Usopp, Zoro and Johnny to get Nami back. But better place than any to mention here, but I guess in the theme of pirates and such, Oda loves his maps, and as I read past East Blue right now, I'm sensing a pattern that I hope remains a staple of the series. I'm unsure if I've ever felt it being crucial so far, aside from this planetary graphic, but One Piece isn't about doing the bare minimum, and after every chapter I read, it becomes more and more obvious why this universe is so adorned when Oda clearly has so much passion in the craft of world building. But yeah, fishmen. We get our first race aside from humans, and in a setting that's dominated by the ocean, these guys are formidable. I'm unsure if they're innately evil or if there's also peaceful fishermen that live about normally, but as far as the fishermen we do see, they leverage their superior strength to oppress and govern Nami's hometown. The cat and mouse style of this arc, where the crew is separated and struggling to reassemble, Zoro chasing Arlong to Kokoyashi but by then he's returned to Arlong Park, and so on, fondly reminded me of the Namek arc from Dragon Ball. It was interesting to see each crew member's take on Nami when skepticism was at its peak. Crew dynamics were also stretched to the limit here, and every interaction felt very genuine to each character. And as far as the backstory goes, I think it's easily Oda's best writing thus far, and it made me want to reread East Blue already with the finer context of Nami's background. This immediately followed by this was a combo my heart wasn't ready for. And after my friend suggested I watch this scene in the anime, not 4Kids, I cried my first tears for this series. This really felt like the climax of the entirety of the East Blue saga, and I was out of my seat during the walk to Arlong Park. But damn, all the final fights were so good. In back-to-back arcs, the environment played a critical role in the fight dynamic. Baratie plays with the idea of watery terrain being a disadvantage to Luffy a little bit, but Arlong Park flicks it up a notch by having the water a death sentence for anyone now. These fishermen don't play underwater. Already superhuman enough to flip houses on their heads when they're on land, they double in strength in the sea, easily peeling rudders off marine ships and even pushing reefs around to create whirlpools. There's so many dimensions added with the inclusion of land and sea-based battle. If this wasn't enough, we get the time crunch of Luffy holding his breath while trapped, including anyone else who dares to step foot underwater. Oda servicing Genzo and Nojiko's desire to contribute by helping free Luffy was great too, not limiting them to quintessentially being on the sidelines. And I am so glad that Zoro's wound wasn't just magically healed by this arc, and it ended up contributing to adding further dimension. There's a lot happening here, and maybe my favorite part was Usopp's fight. If any Straw Hat had a completed arc in East Blue, it was probably Nami. but I feel Oda really snuck in a sleeper with Usopp. While becoming a Brave Warrior of the Sea is still an ongoing dream, this felt like a gigantic hurdle towards accomplishing that goal. I've heard many times people say, if you don't like One Piece by Arlong Park, then maybe it's not for you. And I think that's fair. It does feel like a good wrap up, and I almost want to say that the story could have ended here, although that wouldn't really make sense. The breathers we get between arcs are always enjoyable. Just catching up with the crew on the ship with no drama. Oh. But if that weren't enough, we get a whole arc as kind of a breather? Kinda? Wait, where's the Cook It Up song? I'm embarrassed to admit that it's probably the most ingrained One Piece memory I have. I am a victim. Hey, it's Team Rocket. So I remember seeing Buggy and Alvida in Loguetown from The 4Kids. But again, to praise the cover stories, it feels so much less random through the manga, since we actually see their journey and how they got acquainted, instead of it being ambiguous at best. Who knows for how long, but Loguetown introduces the idea of recurring antagonists, with both Buggy and Smoker declaring passage to the Grand Line. A critique I almost had about One Piece was its rather one-dimensional portrayal of the Marines, where it seems to be a unanimously corrupt system without a shred of ethics in its commanding ranks. Ironic considering his demeanor, but Smoker is our first Marine with sincerely good intentions, and I'm keen to see what that'll mean in future confrontations. But also, how in the heck do you beat this devil fruit power? I'm still not retracting my statement when I said the Chop Chop fruit was OP. They're just both OP. I am dying on this hill. And it almost seems too obvious, but after Smoker's comment on the parallels between Luffy and Roger, I feel obliged to just put this theory on the record. I think Roger is Luffy's dad. Again, it's almost too obvious, but if growing up with my fair share of shonen has taught me anything, criminally low-hanging fruit isn't off the menu. So will I continue reading? I promised myself I wouldn't make those decisions until I read at least 300 chapters, but honestly, I feel confident enough to already say I'm in it for the long run. I'm too keen to see what's happening now in the story, and I feel it'd be a disservice as a self-proclaimed manga fan to have never read One Piece in its entirety. So yes, I'll keep reading, and if I were to give the East Blue Saga a rating, I'll give it an A-. I actually wanted to put it lower because I've heard a lot of great things about future arcs and I don't want all my tier lists congested at the top, but I gotta give East Blue its credit. It's a really solid opener to the series with amazing pace. But I gotta wrap it up here, but please stay tuned because next time we'll be diving into Alabasta. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I reckon at the end of each video I'll put my top 5 favorite characters and arcs just to show you where I'm at. I know Smoker is kind of out of nowhere, but he was always one of my favorites even when I only had a short glimpse of him, so he's my dark horse for now. I almost wanted to put Baratie as number 1, especially because of Hawkeye, but I'd be kidding myself. Arlong Park is number 1. These videos take a long time to make, so a like, sub, anything is appreciated. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you and cheers.